Hey, it's your buddy Peace and Harmony with you here today. We're focusing back in on the covert narcissistic, overt narcissistic, as well as psychopathic tendency for emotional manipulation. And forgive me, I apologize. I have kind of like an allergy or something, so I went into a coughing fit. So hopefully this video will go a little bit more smoothly. As we were saying, the narcissist who has a heightened sense of superiority, self-importance. They feel more important than anyone else in the room. They are very much ego-based. So the ego has an insatiable need for attention. The ego of the narcissist has an insatiable need to control and have power over others. And very much they do this through forms of emotional manipulation. And this can be outward statements, this can be their body language, but most often it's subtle forms of influencing the relationship where there's a lot of criticism going on. The ego has a tendency to constantly need to be better than. The ego has a constant need to be constantly comparing oneself to others, especially in a narcissist who very much lives in the ego. Remember, we've spoken on previous videos about Freud, the father of psychoanalysis, and how he basically organizes the personality into the id, which is the child, which is the part of the personality who's constantly needing to satisfy their basic physical needs, their very basic emotional needs. So it can be very rambunctious, very spontaneous, very childlike. Then the ego, which is the reality tester, which is all about the me, which is never satisfied, which constantly judges, compares, and always wants more, more, more. It's usually very discontent. And then the super ego, which Freud describes as the conscience, the disciplining part of the personality. The one that knows how to discipline, in other words, knows how to regulate the id and the ego, and acts and operates out of a sense of morality, right or wrong, keeping things in line, keeping things on course. So it's almost as if the looking at the Freud psychoanalysis model, forgive me, I still have kind of like a thing in my throat, but looking kind of from the Freud psychoanalytic model, it's as if the narcissist is caught very much up in the ego. And the ego is the one that is constantly judging, constantly unhappy, constantly never feels satisfied, constantly needs to compare, contrast themselves with others, and constantly needs to then accomplish that by putting others down. So they're very much in that ego basis. And so if you feel this emotional manipulation where, in essence, you feel combative with this person, they feel like they're doing the mudslinging. They feel like they're trying to control and overpower you through criticism, through judgment. Realize that this is fear-based, and it exemplifies and it speaks more of how they feel about themselves than how they actually feel about you or whoever is being criticized. Because remember, the narcissist constantly needs to criticize and judge in order to keep themselves seeming as more important, their opinions have more weight and are worth more than you. And so if they can accomplish this through putting others down, they immediately get a sense of self-importance. They are immediately more important than anybody else. And they especially love to judge and emotionally manipulate through judging and criticism, for which they become seemingly more important than others. And it seems like they're the authority when they're very much oftentimes not the authority. And when you really step back and take a look at it, they very much oftentimes don't have a lot that they have accomplished themselves. They have not. It's usually a mask. The ego is their mask with which they're entering into the relationship. I'm seeking for you to basically interact with this mask of emotional manipulation so that you will feel like you constantly have to react to them. You constantly have to satisfy them. You constantly have to please this ego-based mask, which is oftentimes the root of the emotional manipulation. And realize that this is because they want to gain control and power over you through these tactics and tendencies of manipulation. So remember, in our previous video, we're likening it to almost like a puppeteer. Remember back in the day when they would pull the strings and basically they would, they would move that puppet around. The narcissist and the psychopath are very much emotional manipulators in the very same way, where they kind of control and they move others around in the environment to please them. So, and this can impact you on your thinking, your behaviors, and your perceptions. So it can affect you on all layers and levels of your personality, where you're feeling like you have to please, think according to their lines, not be your own person. You just have to be an extension of them. Basically, to please them, is as if they don't permit others who they're seeking to emotionally manipulate. They're just almost creating this atmosphere that you have to live to satisfy them. And so these are the hallmark traits of the narcissist. And we're going to talk here in a moment about how to deal and cope with this. But remember that oftentimes this is oftentimes created underneath your conscious awareness, because in the beginning this person was extremely important to you. You had assigned a sense of importance. You had relegated a sense of importance to them, either because they were a family member, because if they were your partner. There was the love bombing stage where they made you feel like the center of the world. You were the most, beautiful woman. You're the most handsome guy. This individual had love bombed you and had created a sense of euphoria where you two fell in love and, mad, passionate sex. The world seemed to melt away when the two of you were together. So oftentimes this emotional manipulation after the love bombing becomes more painful. You feel like something is quite wrong in the relationship. Things suddenly become feeling like it's very complicated. This person seems to hold judgment and power over you. And these are the tactics of emotional manipulation. So you no longer are directing of yourself and your own life according to what you feel and know inherently is part of your best interest. You now constantly have to deflect to this other individual. You constantly have to refer to this other individual for how to react, how to be, how to content them, how to satisfy them. And so there's a sense of doubt, self-doubt that is instilled in the individual who's being emotionally manipulated, because they now no longer are operating by their own internal guiding mechanism, which is their instinct, which is their oftentimes their own super ego or their own ego. In other words, those boundaries become violated, and then the individual ends up giving over all of their time, energy, attention, and focus towards dancing and pivoting around this individual. So if you feel this way, you are unequivocally, around an emotional manipulator, because an emotional manipulator is just that. They are seeking to manipulate you emotionally to serve their ends, to serve them. It has nothing to do with being beneficial or positive for you. So you have to really look at that. And if your relationship has become so complicated where it's all in your head and you're constantly trying to analyze, am I doing this right for them? Am I doing this wrong for them? Am I doing this, well enough? Am I, do I need to constantly attend to their texts, their emails, their photos, their Instagrams, their Facebook? I mean, it becomes this constant responding to the narcissist. So it's almost like you're living for this other person, and that is out of balance. That is not a healthy relationship. And so this becomes very, very scary, because people end up, feeling like helpless over this situation of emotional manipulation. And as if you belong to them. And so I'm just referring to my notes here. It's as if you belong to them and you're not your own person. Yes, when people are married, we're mutual. We're together as one being. I mean, there is that experience, but yet you have to be independent. You have to be your own person. You have to have your own personality as distinct and separate from each other. So generally, there's the give and take, and then it's kind of like, the two stones that, end up, grating against each other, but then, end up having a nice fit because you kind of go back and forth and you become a nice, groove together, or a nice fit together where one complements the other, and you become mutually interdependent, mutually functional, and, should have a flow back and forth. But realize that in emotional manipulation, it's almost as if you are treated like you belong to them. It's almost like they are mastering you and you are just there to serve them. So that is not a healthy relationship. Healthy relationship should be distinguished by balance. And so emotional manipulation is when someone seeks to overpower your emotions, or where you've now permitted that to occur. And if you've permitted this to occur, it's time to get your self-control back. It's time to get emotional mastery back for yourself, so you feel okay with grabbing the reins back in your own life. You feel you can find the lever within yourself, your mindset, your thought pattern, your beliefs about yourself, your emotional body, your physical body, that you can direct and be yourself, do and have what you want as distinct and separate from this individual, and not just live as a reaction or a source of supply or an object of their emotional manipulation. And so getting back into, we're going to be focusing on this quite a bit, because I think it's very important to understand this and the dynamics that come with letting these people go. If you're used to them running your life, it can be very hard to run your own life because you're so used to their needs, their values, their input, their reactions, them being the priority, them being the important. So oftentimes people feel resourceless, like, how do I pick up and live my own life? And that is through the awareness that this is going on. It's the awareness that the relationship has become too complicated. It's oftentimes not enjoyable because you're constantly having to figure this out. Like, you're constantly feeling like you have to fix them. You constantly feel like they're unhappy. And we're going to be focusing here on how to handle now a emotional manipulator. So realize oftentimes that the emotional manipulator is that they strive to overpower others through emotional manipulation, through the things that they say, the judgments, the lambasting allegations, the false accusations. They're constantly trying to judge and separate people, oftentimes very insulting, derogatory remarks. So oftentimes then people react. They're in a reactive pattern to them. So they constantly feel like they have to react. Explain and justify why someone is the way that they are. Explain and justify why they are the way that they are. You're constantly living in reaction to them. And that's, you're then basically saying, that my life belongs to you. Everybody has to live according to how you think life should be lived. That is not how life is meant to be lived for one person or another. There's many walks of life. There's many viewpoints. There's many different skill sets. There's many different values, opinions. There's many different strengths that individuals have. And so they oftentimes do not like to see or recognize other people's strengths. They feel threatened by doing that because this individual is different and they're not open-minded enough to see the strengths of another. They're closed-minded. They're closed-hearted. They don't like to acknowledge the strengths of others because it makes them feel less than. It makes them feel inferior. It makes them feel weak. So as you can see, an insecure narcissist won't want to give credit where credit is due or acknowledge another's unique strengths. So, if you have to deal with this sort of individual, just remember that part of the beauty and richness of life is that there are many different qualities, there are many different strengths, there's many different types of people. And it takes an open mind to really be able to see and appreciate that. So if you're constantly being berated by this individual, I absolutely recommend just going no contact. It's not worth the fight. Part of what's important in life is choosing your battles, and I very much would not choose to battle with a narcissist because you will never win. Their ego constantly needs to be right. their ego constantly needs to be the one that's all there is, you know. And so, you know, they constantly need to be in the right. So that's a very important feature with a narcissist. So, you know, you can just tell them, you know what, you're right. You're right. You know, and just don't fight with them. Disarm them. You know, oh, you're right. You know, you know, I'm this way, I'm that way, this person's this way, they're that way. Yep, you're right. They just dance to the tune of their own drum. You know, you're right. You know, they have a strength that's different than you. You know, you're right. They have different talents that you don't possess. You know, just put them in their place a little bit. It's a very important thing to do with an emotional manipulator. Peace and harmony with you here today. I hope these videos do help. Please share and please subscribe for more great tools, videos, discussion, and support. Peace.